The fact that we have 1 billion people permanently hungry today and 2 billion people sick with diseases related to food, that's half of humanity, is because of the food system that has been built. In India, we had no serious hunger. We were producing enough food for our people. But from the time globalization started to now, the per capita consumption has dropped from 177 kilograms per capita per year to 150 kilograms per capita per year. Half of the Indian population is now hungry. India, while it has a 9% growth rate, has the highest number of hungry people in the world. And the two processes are related. Because the model of growth that leads to 9% destroys food production by appropriating land from the farmers. What our farmers here are facing, Indian farmers are facing and fighting in the same way. The land grab that is taking place is a very, very important part of the global economy. And while the global economy is working primarily with fictitious finance that is 70 times more than the real economy of the world, and it was a bubble waiting to burst, which is why the Wall Street bubble burst with the subprime crisis. The same people who tell you that Wall Street is the place wealth gets created are also grabbing the lands of the African peasant, the Indian peasant, because land ultimately is the real asset. And speculative takeover of land is a major reason. Of course, you have to say, I'll make a high-tech city, I'll make an export-oriented zone, I'll make, in India, the special economic zones were meant for exports, but they meant no rules apply, no environmental law, no law for workers' rights, and today is Labor Day, so everyone who works, including the farmers, 3 cheers to the fact that they continue to work. Basically, what globalization became was a right to exploit nature and people without limits. And that's the reason we see what is happening to India and China, the big emerging powers they call us. They call us the emerging economies, and I always laugh at that. Because neither the Chinese civilization nor the Indian civilization is emerging today. We've been around for very, very long. In fact, the US could be called the emerging economy. Just got born recently. Why do we need an alternative? Why do we need to make a serious paradigm shift? First, because the current model can only create a huge human tragedy. I see 90% of my country being rendered disposable. And if 90% of a society is told, you don't matter, we'll take your land but we'll throw you away, we'll take your water and your river and we'll throw you away, you cannot govern. Which is why we now have in 1/3 of India what is called a Maoist movement and a left extremist movement trying to fight for people's rights because democracy is not being allowed to work. Globalization has undermined democracy. It has undermined democracy by national democratic processes and people's voices to decide how an economy will be run. And if you destroy democracy, you're going to have the birth of violence. The second reason why we seriously need is this model is based on two very, very false assumptions. The first assumption is that you can have limitless growth. And that limitless growth means a limitless planet, but the planet has limits. So in a limited planet, the idea of limitless growth is an absurdity and irresponsibility. But there's a second reason why this model cannot be sustained. And that is, it's a model that tells everyone, you are free to be a consumer. But again, very important on 1st of May, on Workers' Day, it says everyone right to be a producer. You don't have a right to be a farmer. You cannot have a world of consumers without producers. Because production gives you the entitlement to consume. We can see this crisis in America, where every family was spending 3 times more than their income to consume. That consumption was driving the Chinese economy. With the bursting of bubbles, people in debt, people losing jobs, people losing homes. Even Walmart is a luxury. And guess what people are turning to in America? Gardening. 1/3 of Americans are producing their own food because of the economic crisis. Now, if 1/3 of America is having to produce its own food because of the crisis, and I got this most beautiful letter from a young man, I think in Detroit. You know, one of the people who's lost their work and everything, but he read my book, Soil Not Oil, and he says, "Thank you, you gave me the idea that I could build soil. And not only do I produce food for myself, I produce food for my entire community. And I've never been happier, even though I have no money, no job, no nothing, but I'm producing food." Now, if a worker who's unemployed in America can find a new life in working with the soil and producing food, I think it is unjust to take away the right to produce from the small farmers of Asia. That's another reason why we need to rethink the current model.